I thank the Minister for his fulsome responses. I just want to take one final call on my last SOP. The Minister and I are never going to see eye to eye on this. On the issue of the tenancy tribunals, it's not happening, Minister. And if he talks to any of the advocates who are out there, it's not happening. And I think it's far cleaner that the tenancy tribunal just says you can have an advocate. There are powers in the tenancy tribunal to exclude people who go in and are problematic. So if someone goes in and is vexatious and deliberately dragging it out, the tribunal can deal with that. And I think that is far easier than having this convoluted list of things saying, well, you can have an advocate for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, when we know from experience of tenants that it's not happening. So I think this is just a really clean and simple way of dealing with it, and I don't think it will cause the problems that the Minister is outlining. When it comes to the Rugby World Cup issue, yes, of course, boarding house tenants will have more protection under the law, but all it means is that a landlord just has to give them more notice that he's going to evict them. It doesn't mean that he can't evict them. It just means that instead of being able to say in 24 hours notice you have to get out, a landlord is now going to be alerted that now I have to give 48 days notice, or now I have to give 90 days notice. It's just notice. And what the Minister didn't address in my question was that tenants are being told they're going to be given 90-day notices. We've had plenty of warning that the Rugby World Cup is coming. It's not something that suddenly jumps up overnight and landlords think, oh, here we go. So I don't think the Minister actually addressed either of those questions. My final SOP, Mr Chair, is on cleansing orders. Now, the Select Committee actually removed and Labor voted for it because at the time we thought it seemed sensible on the arguments that we'd heard. Removed the requirement for a tenant to be told when there was a cleansing order, where a cleansing order had been put on a property. Now, we heard a lot of argument about why this was ridiculous, why it would be unfair to landlords, that something, if it's been all cleaned up and it's all hunky-dory and fine, why should you worry, tenants, yada, yada, yada. Well, at the time, that actually kind of made sense, and I think we were under quite a lot of pressure to get things back. We didn't have time to investigate this as much as we should have. I've been contacted by a number of people who work in this area since then who were really, really concerned that the Select Committee took this out, and I think it raises enough concern that the Select Committee should actually put it back, the Committee of the Whole House should actually put it back in. Because what I've been told is that, in fact, there aren't consistent standards for, and what we're talking about here largely is methamphetamine labs. That's what this was trying to address, because they do leave residue which is dangerous, and yes, we should deal with that. Now, the argument we heard was, of course, it's put on the limb. Well, tenants don't have enough money to pay for a limb in order to see whether or not there's been a cleansing order. I mean, who's going to go and pay up to $300 or $400 on the off chance there might have been a cleansing order on your property for a methamphetamine lab? Tenants simply cannot afford to do that, and they're not going to, and they shouldn't be required to. I've discussed this with the Property Investors Federation. I mean, obviously they'd rather that this wasn't in there, but what I have done, Mr Chair, is I have put a 5-year limit on that, and they said that they would be more happy with this clause if it had a 5-year limit. So for the 5 years following a cleansing order, during that time a tenant would need to be notified that there was a cleansing order on that property and be able to be shown the documentation that it had been cleaned up. I think that the protection of tenants should be paramount. I think that the chemicals we're dealing with here are very dangerous. I don't think that the Select Committee made this decision with all the information in front of us. Yes, it is a requirement under law for a cleansing order to be placed on the limb. I've been told by councils that that practice is not uniform. Some councils actually take it off the limb once the cleansing order has been approved. Some leave it on. It's not policed. Some councils don't know when a methamphetamine lab has been found, so they don't even know that it's meant to be on the limb. I just think, Minister, there are too many questions in this area, and I think that the clause that the Minister himself drafted and put into the legislation should be put back into the legislation until we are certain that this is an undue burden. As I've said, I've spoken to the Property Investors Federation. They've said a 5-year time limit would make them far more comfortable with this. I would welcome any short comments the Minister has on this, and I really hope that maybe this is the one SOP that we can get maybe some agreement on. But again, I say that on all my other SOPs he hasn't really answered my question, which I think suggests to me that perhaps he doesn't have an answer to my question.
Mr.